The rumble of the diesel engine became my constant companion across those endless highways, a mechanical heartbeat that reminded me of the choices I'd made to support my family. Every mile traveled, every dollar earned, was a thread in the tapestry of hope I wove for my younger sister Maya, believing she would be safe and loved in my absence. Yet when I finally returned home, the reality I discovered was a devastating contradiction to everything I had imagined. Instead of the bright, spirited girl I remembered, I found a hollow shell of the child I once knew, imprisoned within the walls of what should have been her sanctuary. The architect of this nightmare was my stepmother, Victoria. I had convinced myself I was doing everything correctly. Each month, I faithfully transferred money home, certain it would guarantee Maya's well-being. Weekly phone conversations filled with laughter and stories reinforced my belief that Victoria would honor the sacred promise she made at our father's graveside. However, as the layers of deception slowly unraveled, the carefully constructed facade crumbled before my eyes, exposing the horrifying reality of neglect and calculated manipulation. The realization struck me with devastating force. Had I postponed my return any longer, I might have lost Maya forever, her spirit extinguished by the very person entrusted with her care. My name is Marcus, and at 28 years old, I have dedicated most of my adult life to long-distance trucking, navigating the interstate corridors from California to Nevada and Arizona. Each week granted me only a day or two of rest, a bitter exchange for employment that paid well but robbed me of life's most precious commodity, time with those I loved most. 18 months ago, I lost my father to pancreatic cancer, a merciless disease that claimed him within 3 months of diagnosis. I can still see his exhausted eyes, filled with equal measures of weariness and desperation, as he grasped my hand with his remaining strength, pleading, "Marcus, Maya needs you. Promise me you'll keep her safe." Maya was quiet by nature, inherently shy, and born with a rare autoimmune condition that had made her vulnerable throughout her life. Our mother passed away when Maya was only 4 years old, and since that devastating loss, our father had been her entire universe. Following the funeral, I stood in contemplative silence before the modest house in suburban Riverside, the place our father had always called the only legacy I can leave my children. I desperately wanted to fulfill my promise immediately. I attempted to take Maya with me right away, but circumstances made it impossible. I had no permanent residence, no stable environment suitable for caring for a child who required specialized attention. I lived in my truck's sleeper cab, and the road ahead stretched endlessly before me. My stepmother Victoria, the woman who had entered our father's life 6 years earlier, was appointed by the court as Maya's temporary guardian. She embraced me on the day of the funeral, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "Don't worry, I'll care for Maya exactly as he would have wanted." I believed her completely. I had no alternative but to trust her words. I departed Riverside with a heart heavy with grief and responsibility. During the drive back to the distribution center, I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see Maya standing in the doorway calling my name. But she never called out, and I didn't turn back. I still vividly remember the day Dad first brought Victoria home to meet us. She possessed a warm smile, perfectly styled auburn hair, and eyes that made you feel genuinely understood and valued. Maya was only 10 at the time and had never formed connections with anyone outside of Dad and me. However, the moment she met Victoria, she climbed into her lap and allowed her to braid her hair as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Dad witnessed that interaction, and his eyes filled with tears of joy. His voice trembled with emotion as he said, "She finally has a mother figure." The wedding ceremony took place shortly afterward, a simple celebration in our backyard. Many neighbors attended the festivities. Everyone was charmed by Victoria. She spoke with gentle authority, carried herself with natural grace, and consistently referred to Maya as my precious angel. To the entire community, she appeared to be the ideal stepmother, compassionate, patient, and nurturing. I used to share that perception completely. Victoria never raised her voice in anger and never displayed irritation. Instead, she showered Maya with stuffed animals, baked elaborate birthday cakes from scratch, and even arranged appointments at a specialized pediatric clinic without Dad requesting it. Everything seemed so harmonious that even strangers assumed Victoria was our biological mother. During those days, Dad would gesture toward the house and declare, "I may not have much wealth to pass down, but this house, this is the one thing I want to preserve for you children." I believed Victoria understood that sentiment completely, that she valued what it represented, and that she would maintain her solemn promise. But that was before Dad's passing, before everything began to deteriorate, and I remained completely oblivious to the approaching storm. After Dad's death, I made it my routine to call Maya every evening. Whether parked at a rest area surrounded by towering pines or in my cab overlooking snow-covered fields, I always found a way to connect with her. It was the only method I had to feel I was still honoring my promise to Dad. Initially, Maya always answered with an enthusiastic voice. She would tell me about the neighbor's tabby cat that visited daily and the ceramics class she hoped to join once her health stabilized. I would hear her infectious giggle, which brought me momentary peace. Even though I couldn't be physically present with her, I did everything within my power to provide for her. As a long-haul trucker, I earned approximately $6,500 monthly. After taxes and essential road expenses, I sent $1,600 home each month for Victoria to care for Maya. While it wasn't an enormous sum, it was sufficient for them to live comfortably in Dad's house. Every time I transferred the money, Victoria would respond with the same brief message: "Received, thank you." However, after several months, the phone calls began growing shorter than less frequent. I distinctly remember one conversation 10 months ago. I dialed Maya's number, but Victoria answered instead. Her voice was emotionless and flat. The pediatrician recommended limiting Maya's phone usage. Electromagnetic radiation can potentially compromise her immune system. When I pressed for additional details, all she said was, "Don't worry, Maya's doing fine." From that point forward, Maya only communicated through text messages. No more calls, no more of that bubbly voice I had grown to treasure. Just brief impersonal messages. "I'm okay, busy with homework, don't worry." Something about those texts felt fundamentally wrong to me. I attempted calling repeatedly, but no one ever answered. Sometimes I would hear the phone ring endlessly into silence. In the days that followed, I began experiencing nightmares. In them, Maya stood on the front porch in pouring rain, desperately trying to call my name, but no sound emerged from her lips. I was only a few steps away, but I couldn't move, couldn't reach her. I would jolt awake in the truck's sleeper berth, my shirt soaked in cold perspiration. I knew instinctively that something was terribly wrong, though I couldn't identify exactly what. I had always believed that even if I couldn't be physically present for Maya, I could still protect her from a distance by sending money, maintaining contact, and trusting that Victoria was providing proper care. But that trust began to fracture. One night, while resting at a truck stop south of Bakersfield, I received an email notification from my bank. The secondary account I had established specifically for Maya had been charged nearly $450 at a luxury beauty salon. I frowned in confusion. That wasn't something a sick 15-year-old would require. Before I could fully process this information, another charge appeared the following day: premium skincare products, aromatherapy oils, and a therapeutic massage chair. Nearly $1,200 had been spent within 4 days. I immediately called Victoria. I needed answers about what was happening. She answered after several rings, sounding drowsy and irritated, as if I were interrupting her leisure time. "What is it, Marcus? I'm busy." I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Maya just used the secondary account to purchase beauty products. Do you know anything about this?" Victoria didn't hesitate to acknowledge it. Her voice carried annoyance, almost defensiveness. "I used it to buy wellness products for Maya, things she requires for her condition." I maintained a steady tone, attempting to remain calm. "What exactly are these products? Why are we discussing makeup and spa gift certificates?" There was a moment of silence on her end, followed by a soft, almost dismissive laugh. "You're overanalyzing the situation. If it makes you feel better, I'll forward you the receipts." I ended the call immediately without saying another word. It had been nearly 3 weeks since I last spoke with Maya, and she still wouldn't answer my calls. I couldn't tolerate the uncertainty any longer. I decided to return home immediately after completing my current delivery. I contacted my company and requested emergency leave. I had to get back right away. It was a 14-hour drive through the frigid night, thick fog swirling like smoke around my truck. Nearly 800 miles of highway stretched before me. The cab was eerily silent except for the sound of wind howling outside and my heart pounding as if it might explode. I pulled into the driveway just before sunrise. The sky remained dim and overcast. Dad's house, the one that used to resonate with laughter, smell like freshly baked cookies, and glow with warm golden light from every window, now felt cold and lifeless. There was no porch light illuminating the entrance, no flower boxes beside the door. Everything stood motionless like a house the world had abandoned and forgotten. I knocked firmly on the door, no response. I was about to call out when I heard soft, hesitant footsteps approaching. The door creaked open slowly, revealing Maya. I almost didn't recognize her. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, her hair was greasy and matted against her face, and she appeared pale and emaciated. She looked like an 11-year-old instead of 15. She wore a faded, oversized sweater with holes near the shoulders. In her arms, she clutched a stuffed elephant I had given her for her birthday 2 years ago. Its ribbon was frayed and one ear was partially torn, but Maya held it close as if it were the only safe thing remaining in her world. She didn't run to embrace me, shed no tears, displayed no smile. She simply stood there and whispered, as if even her voice might shatter the fragile silence, "You came back." I stepped inside immediately. Dad's photograph was missing from the wall, along with all family pictures. Only one large portrait hung in the center of the living room, Victoria in an elegant black dress, smiling radiantly against a pristine white background. The refrigerator was nearly empty, a carton of expired milk and a few stale slices of bread in an open plastic bag. The kitchen felt cold and unused. The dining table was covered in a layer of dust. I walked to the backyard. Dad's beloved orange trees had been left to wither and die. Dead leaves carpeted the pathway. The grass had grown knee-high. The small yard where Maya used to ride her bicycle was now consumed by weeds and shadows. When I turned back toward the house, Maya looked at me and said something that completely shattered my heart. "I only get to eat when she comes home. She says overeating will make my condition worse." I stood there frozen in place. Part of me wanted to tear the entire house apart in rage. The other part simply wanted to hold Maya and never let her go again. But I recognized this situation was far more complex than I had initially understood, and this wasn't the complete picture of what had been happening. We sat together on the back steps. Maya pressed close to me, still holding that slice of stale bread she couldn't bring herself to eat. Her eyes were fixed on the overgrown orange grove as if she were gazing into another world where she once had a father, a brother, and a childhood filled with joy. I remained silent, simply wrapping my jacket around her shoulders and allowing the quiet to envelop us both. After a while, she spoke so softly I had to lean closer to hear her words. "Do you remember the acrylic paint set you gave me last Christmas?" "I still have it, but she won't let me paint anymore. She says it's a waste of time and money." I gently squeezed her shoulder and asked softly, "Why would she say that?" Maya remained quiet for several moments. Then slowly, as if gathering all her courage, she said, "Someone comes to the house every few weeks. They ask me questions and take notes. Before they arrive, she makes me lie in bed, cover myself with blankets, cough occasionally, and remain quiet." I held my breath as the truth began to spill out. Before I could respond, Maya continued speaking. "She tells me if I don't appear sick enough, there won't be any medication, no food, and no one would care about me anymore." Her voice began to tremble with emotion. I turned to face her directly. She was biting her lip hard, fighting back tears. I pulled her into my arms protectively. Then even more quietly, she whispered, "She said the sicker I am, the more money people send, and no one would want me here if I ever got better." I clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms, the physical pain cutting through my emotional anguish. Maya looked up at me, her eyes glazed over as if she was about to reveal something else. But the back door creaked open and there stood Victoria. Her eyes flicked toward me with just a flicker of surprise, but it vanished quickly. She put on her usual composed expression and looked directly at Maya. "Come inside, it's getting cold." When she spoke, Maya stood up but didn't look back at me. I watched her shoulders tremble slightly, like someone had just yanked her away from the only moment she was allowed to feel like herself. I remained there alone. Maya's confession had been interrupted, but I had heard enough to understand the truth. She was trapped in a cruel performance she never chose to participate in, and I could no longer remain silent. After a cold, tension-filled breakfast, Victoria went upstairs to make a phone call. Maya retreated to the corner of the table, pretending to focus on her schoolwork, but her eyes kept darting toward me. I understood her message clearly. She was trying not to draw attention, not to give Victoria any reason to become suspicious. I stood up and walked down the hallway, running my hand along the wall where Maya's childhood artwork used to hang. Now it was completely bare. Even the charcoal portrait of my father that he once proudly displayed outside his study was gone. That room, Dad's study, was now kept locked, but the lock hadn't been changed. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, not to snoop or invade privacy, but simply because I missed him terribly. The room still carried the scent of aged books, polished wood, and dried ink. Everything was coated in a thin layer of dust, as if someone had tried to bury this space in forgotten memories. I approached his old desk, the oak surface he used to polish every evening. The drawer still bore the coffee ring stain I had left when I was 17. I opened the bottom drawer, his usual location for important documents. Inside was a disorganized stack of files. Right on top was a large manila envelope, partially opened, clearly stamped on the front, "Riverside County Property Records Office." I pulled it out and scanned through the contents. It was the official deed to the house. New owner, Victoria M. Sterling. Transfer completed following husband's death. With no will contested and no objection from next of kin, I froze, feeling as if I had just been struck across the face. I remembered so clearly the night before Dad was admitted to the hospital for the final time. He sat on the porch, frail and weak, holding Victoria's hand. I was there too. His voice was barely audible but firm when he said, "This house is the only thing I have to leave for my children. I don't care what happens afterward. I want you to promise me you won't touch it." Victoria nodded without hesitation. "I promise I'll never take anything from the children. This is their home." I believed her completely. Dad did too, and now her signature sat at the bottom of that transfer document. A letter from Dad's former attorney requesting confirmation was tucked underneath, sent to this address, already opened and buried among miscellaneous papers as if someone had tried to hide it but didn't have the courage or conviction to destroy it completely. In that moment, I understood everything. I had been erased quietly and completely. I sat down in Dad's old chair, the one with the slight lean to the right. His handprint was still worn into the armrest, but now nothing here truly belonged to him anymore. The pain didn't strike like a sudden blow. It seeped in like salt pressed into an old wound, the final betrayal of a dying man's last request by the person he trusted most in the world. I walked out of Dad's study with a heavy heart but renewed determination. No shouting, no slamming doors. Just one thing rising inside me now, an urgent need to uncover the complete truth. Victoria could take the house, but she wasn't going to continue hiding everything from me. I headed to the small diner down the street, the same place Dad used to take us for pancakes when we were children. I pulled out my phone and began researching. I remembered what Maya had mentioned about someone visiting the house every few weeks, asking questions, taking notes, and leaving. Whoever that was had to be a social worker or someone connected to a medical assistance program. I logged into California's Medicaid and Public Assistance portal, something I had helped Dad navigate when he was applying for Maya's medications. Using his information, I traced the old records and eventually located the most recent ones. Listed under long-term medical support for chronically ill minors, Maya T. Anderson, legal guardian and representative, Victoria M. Sterling. Each month, Victoria received nearly $2,300 in assistance from two sources, in-home Medicaid caregiver payments and SSI benefits for direct guardianship. I investigated further. It took over an hour of cross-referencing various pieces of information, but the picture began to form clearly. Victoria was receiving caregiver compensation based on the severity of Maya's condition. Every time a caseworker or healthcare professional visited, Maya was coached on how to perform her illness, coughing, lying down, speaking in weak sentences. No new prescriptions, no updated medical records from any hospital in nearly 5 months. I knew exactly what this meant. Victoria was fabricating Maya's illness for financial profit. I pulled up my email again, reviewing bank alerts connected to the debit card I had established for Maya. The spending timeline aligned perfectly with the benefit disbursements. Spa treatments, high-end cosmetics, upscale restaurants, premium skincare services. Meanwhile, Maya was eating stale bread, wearing threadbare clothing, and her medical log remained completely blank for months. I sat there, stunned by what I had discovered. This wasn't just anger anymore. I was shocked by how calculated, methodical, and cold Victoria's scheme was. She didn't physically abuse Maya or scream at her. She simply drained her slowly, quietly, dollar by dollar, breath by breath. The most horrifying part was realizing that if I hadn't come home when I did, she would have continued this exploitation indefinitely. That afternoon, I parked across the street and observed the house from a distance. Everything appeared too quiet, the kind of unnatural silence that makes your skin crawl. I waited until evening when I saw Victoria drive away, probably heading to a spa or an expensive restaurant somewhere. Maya was still inside, alone. This was my opportunity. I decided to walk around the neighborhood and speak with some of the longtime neighbors our family used to be close with. I immediately spotted the familiar white picket fence in front of Mrs. Patterson's house, still slightly warped from last winter's storm damage. I knocked on her door. Mrs. Patterson, nearly 75 now with silver hair and reading glasses hanging from a chain, recognized me immediately when she opened the door. "Well, my goodness, Marcus, how long has it been since you were back in the neighborhood?" I didn't waste time with small talk. I asked directly about Maya. She looked at me thoughtfully for a moment, then shook her head and sighed deeply. "That little girl looks so thin lately. I hardly see her outside anymore. Once I saw her curled up on the back steps during a cold morning and all she had on was a thin sweater. I called out to her but she kept her head down, hugging her knees. It broke my heart." I swallowed hard as she continued, her voice dropping lower as if she were afraid someone might overhear. "As for Victoria, I don't know what to say. I see her heading to the spa every week, getting her hair styled, and carrying shopping bags from expensive stores. Once, a delivery truck brought boxes of beauty products with French labels. I spoke with several other neighbors on the block. One middle-aged man told me he witnessed Maya fall while trying to climb the back steps one afternoon. Victoria stood there, said something under her breath, and went inside, leaving the girl to get up by herself. No one had concrete proof. No one had seen Victoria physically harm her or lock her away. But they all shared the same expression when discussing Maya: guilt, regret, and a helplessness that cut deep. I recognized that feeling intimately. I had been absent too long, lived too far away, but these people had been nearby. They had observed things, sensed something was wrong, but didn't know how to intervene. At that moment, I stopped caring about gathering more evidence. I simply wanted to get Maya out of that situation before she lost whatever light still remained inside her spirit. The next day, I contacted the high school Maya was attending. She had once mentioned enjoying her art class and that her homeroom teacher's name was Ms. Rodriguez, a compassionate woman my father used to describe as someone who truly cares. After classes ended, I scheduled a meeting with Ms. Rodriguez for late afternoon. Her office was located at the far end of the arts wing hallway, with walls covered in vibrant student artwork, cheerful colors that only made the weight in my chest feel heavier. Ms. Rodriguez was in her mid-40s with neatly arranged black hair, a petite frame, and sharp, attentive eyes. When I introduced myself as Maya's brother, something shifted in her expression. Professional formality gave way to genuine concern, even sadness. "I've been waiting for someone from the family to appear," she said quietly, "for months." I froze as she continued. Maya's absences have been constant. Sometimes she's gone for an entire week. The excuse is always the same, chronic illness flare-up. But there's never a doctor's note, no medical updates, no verification at all. I asked her how Maya was performing in class when she did attend. Ms. Rodriguez opened a drawer and pulled out a student folder. Inside were attendance records, behavioral notes, and a stack of drawings. The sketches were rough, almost frantic images of prison bars, locked windows, and a small figure curled up in an empty room. She's been creating artwork like this for the past 4 months, Ms. Rodriguez said softly. I asked her once if something was wrong at home. She looked down and didn't say a word, but I knew something wasn't right. Then she pulled out a small note written in pencil, the handwriting shaky and uncertain. I want to go outside, I want to come to school every day, I want to paint. At the bottom was a scribbled signature, Maya. Ms. Rodriguez's voice dropped to almost a whisper. She gave me this during lunch break, but later that afternoon her stepmother came by and insisted on taking it back, claiming Maya had made it up to avoid schoolwork. I felt my entire body drain of energy. I had worried, I had suspected, but now I knew with certainty that Maya wasn't just being neglected. She was living in a silent prison where her voice had been stolen, her dreams locked away, and the one person who should have protected her had been absent for far too long. I looked up at Ms. Rodriguez, my voice shaking but determined. I'm getting her out of there, I promise you that. That night I returned to the house that should have still belonged to Maya and me. Victoria didn't look surprised to see me. Perhaps she had been expecting this confrontation, maybe she had already prepared for it. The moment I saw her, I spoke directly. We need to talk, living room. Now. She raised an eyebrow slightly, then turned her back and walked away as if I had simply asked her to review a utility bill. We sat in the living room, no photos of Dad, no pictures of our family, just a brand new leather furniture set, cold beige walls, and that same portrait of her in black still hanging dead center, the only thing in the room treated as if it mattered. I laid all the documents on the table, the deed transfer, the bank statements from Maya's card, the government assistance reports. She glanced at the pile without blinking. You took everything, I said, my voice tight with controlled anger. The house, the money, custody of Maya, all of it. I followed the law, she replied flatly. You left, I stayed, I raised her. My teeth clenched, but this time I didn't tiptoe around the truth. I sent $1,600 every month for Maya. So why is she eating stale bread? Why is the milk expired from 2 weeks ago? Why hasn't she had a new prescription in 5 months? And why hasn't she been attending school regularly? She went quiet for a moment, looking at me as if deciding whether it was worth pretending anymore. Then she set down her wine glass and met my eyes directly. For the first time, the fake kindness vanished completely. What remained was bare and unapologetic. If you care that much, take her, she said coldly. I froze in disbelief. Then she smiled, that thin, razor-edged smile I had never seen before. But I forgot, this house is mine now. You have no right to stay here. No hesitation, no shame whatsoever. The air in the room became suffocating. Then soft footsteps echoed down the stairs. Maya stood there wearing a thin sweater, barefoot, gripping the banister as if letting go would cause her to collapse. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but no tears fell. She simply looked at me, didn't speak, didn't move, just looked. I met her gaze, my chest burning as if it might burst open. But I knew I couldn't take her with me immediately, not yet, not legally. I gave her a slight nod, then said steadily and clearly, wait for me, I'll come back. Then I turned and walked out. The door closed behind me with a soft click, but to me it sounded like a judge's gavel. That night I slept in my truck's cab, or at least attempted to. I couldn't rest, not because I was angry, not even because I was heartbroken. It was because I knew that if I didn't act immediately, there would come a day when I would lose Maya forever. The following morning, I contacted the law office that had assisted my father with medical paperwork during his final years. Fortunately, they still had his records on file, and a young attorney named Sarah Martinez agreed to provide me with a free consultation. I arrived with everything: the deed transfer, bank statements, Medicaid documentation, Maya's teacher's letter, her drawings, and the handwritten note she had once given to Ms. Rodriguez. All of it stuffed inside a worn folder, every page representing a piece of the life I had been absent from for far too long. Sarah read through everything without interrupting. When I finished explaining the situation, she nodded slowly but firmly. We have solid grounds to petition the court for a custody review, she said. And if we can prove abuse or financial exploitation of government assistance, she won't just lose guardianship, she could face criminal charges. I asked, can I take Maya with me right now? She shook her head, responding as gently as possible. Not yet, Victoria still has legal custody, but if Child Protective Services intervenes, that can change quickly. So that same day, I called CPS. I submitted everything: a comprehensive report on Maya's living conditions, neighbor testimonies, her teacher's statement, spending records, every detail I had uncovered. They assured me an investigation would begin within 72 hours. Those 3 days were the longest of my life. I continued driving, taking the shortest delivery routes I could find, but my mind wasn't on the road. Every time my phone rang, my heart jumped, terrified it would be devastating news, afraid I had waited one step too long to act. Then late afternoon on the third day, I received the call. It was a social worker named Jennifer Walsh. Her voice was calm but carried significant weight. We just left Ms. Victoria's residence. Maya was interviewed privately. She was very clear with us. I don't want to live with her anymore. After that call, I stood there in an empty parking lot, both hands gripping the steering wheel, my chest tight as if I were about to scream. But I didn't because for the first time, Maya had spoken up for herself. And this time, adults were finally listening to her voice. 3 weeks after the CPS home visit, I received an official call from the family court in Riverside. They informed me that an emergency custody hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. The reason, preliminary evidence suggested that the current guardian may be misusing government benefits, violating ethical duties of minor care, and causing both physical and emotional harm to the child. I remained silent for a moment before saying thank you, not because I was surprised, but because I had been waiting for this moment for weeks. The moment when the law finally began to stand on Maya's side. On the day of the hearing, I appeared in court wearing a simple green shirt, not to make an impression, but because it was Maya's favorite color. Sitting beside me was Sarah, calm and composed. Across from us sat Victoria in a pale gray suit with full makeup, but her eyes couldn't hide the tension and fear. Maya sat in the separate section reserved for minors, with a social worker beside her, gently holding her hand like a protective older sister. Maya didn't look at Victoria. She didn't look at me either. She kept her eyes fixed on the judge's bench, and for the first time I saw something solid and unshakable in her gaze: determination. The hearing proceeded quickly. Sarah presented our evidence systematically. The CPS representative confirmed what they had witnessed during their visit. No follow-up medical appointments for nearly 5 months, living conditions lacking basic care, nutrition completely inadequate, clear misuse of Maya's debit card for personal luxury spending. Most importantly, Maya had voluntarily spoken up and clearly stated she did not want to remain with her current guardian. Then came the judge's ruling. This court hereby suspends the legal guardianship of Ms. Victoria Sterling. The child will be placed in temporary care of a qualified next of kin pending the outcome of a formal investigation. Victoria shot to her feet. This is outrageous. She's been manipulated. I've raised that girl for years while he disappeared like a coward. Court officers moved quickly, escorting her out as she continued shouting blame and denials. I didn't respond to her accusations. I simply turned toward Maya. She stood up from her seat and walked toward me. Then suddenly she threw her arms around me. For the first time in so long, I felt her shoulders steady, no more trembling. In that moment, I knew I had made it back in time. After the hearing, the court ruled that Maya would be placed in temporary care of her closest living relative, Aunt Rebecca, our mother's younger sister. She had offered to take Maya in many times before, but Victoria had consistently blocked it. I drove Maya to Aunt Rebecca's house in the suburbs of Corona. It wasn't fancy or large, but it smelled like freshly baked banana bread, had family photographs lining the hallway, and most importantly, a pair of open arms waiting for Maya to walk into. Aunt Rebecca pulled her into a tight embrace, no questions, no explanations needed, just tears and a whisper. "I'm sorry. I should have fought for you a long time ago." Maya didn't say anything, but she leaned into that hug longer than usual. I stood in the doorway, feeling something inside me finally begin to ease, like I had just removed a backpack full of stones. As for Victoria, she disappeared from the neighborhood after the hearing. Word spread that she had hired a lawyer, planning to appeal the decision, but the evidence was overwhelming. Welfare fraud, financial exploitation of guardianship, neglect and isolation of a minor. Her case was handed over to the Federal Financial Crimes Unit. There were no more courtroom outbursts, no more lengthy accusatory text messages, just silence. The kind of silence that only comes when someone finally realizes they no longer have the power to destroy anything. I knew she would twist the story, blame everyone except herself. But this time there was no one left to listen to her lies. The old house where all of this began was still standing, cold and empty. Victoria was forced to put it up for sale, unable to keep up with the taxes and maintenance costs. But I didn't go back, and Maya never asked about it because that house was just a shell. Home is where someone keeps their promise to return and does. 3 months after Maya left Victoria's house, I received a call from the court. I was officially recognized as her legal guardian. There was no applause, no dramatic moments, just a single sheet of paper in my hand and a quiet sense of peace slowly filling my chest. I rented a modest apartment near Maya's school. Nothing elaborate, just 2 bedrooms, a simple kitchen, and a small balcony overlooking the West Side Park. But for us, it was more than enough. I left long-haul trucking and switched to local delivery routes with only daytime shifts. Every evening, I came home to cook simple dinners and listen to Maya talk about her day at school. She rejoined her art class, signed up for the sketching club, and even enrolled in a weekend pottery class, Ms. Rodriguez's suggestion. One evening, I found her sitting on the balcony, holding that old acrylic paint set I had given her for Christmas 2 years ago, the one I thought Victoria had thrown away long ago. Maya was painting the old house, but in her version, the roof was repaired, the orange trees were green and flourishing, lanterns hung from the porch, and two siblings sat together in the yard, sharing a meal under the afternoon sun. I stepped closer. She looked up at me and smiled, the kind of genuine smile I hadn't seen since the day we lost Dad. That house isn't there anymore, she said quietly, but I think it was never really home anyway. I asked, then where is our home? Maya looked at me, her eyes no longer carrying fear or uncertainty. Nothing was held back anymore. Home is wherever you are. This is my story of how my sister and I fought to reclaim our freedom and our future. Before I conclude, I want to ask you, what would you do if someone you loved, your own family, was being harmed and the person responsible was someone who once called themselves family? Would you have the courage to break the silence and stand up for justice for someone you love? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for listening to our story. If you've ever witnessed injustice, don't turn away, because sometimes all it takes is one person brave enough to speak up to save an entire life. If stories about justice, resilience, and healing matter to you, please follow this channel so we can continue sharing the voices that need to be heard. Your support means everything to us. Take care and see you in the next story.